So our tree lord is not just out, walking out in the woods having a constitutional. He's loaded for bear. You know what I mean? He's out there. He's got himself a big old spear.
Yeah.
And it is, it's magical. You wouldn't just walk out there with a normal spear. That would be weird if you're a tree lord. So
yeah, any tree lord with a non-magical spear,
this guy's a piker, probably.
Yeah, that's just a dude in a suit. That's Scooby-Doo.
Right, exactly. It's a big zipper. Right,
yeah. Exactly.
Like, Old Man Wilson, yeah.
It was 3 children stacked on the shoulders the whole time.
Right, yeah. But this one is not, because this lord,
yeah,
a big giant glowing spear, and this is a little, I don't want to say it's reminiscent, but it's like the other side of the coin from the famous power weapon.
Totally,
one.
We're circling back to that.
Yeah, yeah.
But how do you paint magic?
Exactly.
Yeah, so we're just talking about blending again, and just applying that with a little bit of a style in mind.
Instead of just the kind of more straight fades that you see on like a bladed power weapon, because there's so much going on in this cool spearhead, you're doing that same thing. And honestly, if you watch like the first, 13 minutes of this video, it just goes from but the first 13 minutes, he just goes from white to like nearly finished. And it's very amazing to watch. And then you come back after it dries a little bit, do a little bit of glazing and some edge highlighting. So there's also a good lesson about edge highlighting in here too.
With practice comes precision
and speed.
Yeah. Like time this out and then ask yourself, do I have 10 minutes to or however long it takes to you can get there. Take a day, practice this one technique. All your following days will be a lot more fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Back for another exciting edition. This time we're going to be talking about magical weaponry. Very similar to painting a power sword, but let's just get into it because it will provide some inspiration. Colors at play. Kato red at base, Kato red highlight, Vallejo black and white. Got a little bit of that. Each of those on my palette. So this model started with a black base coat, which painting a bright color layer upon layer over black is not highly recommended if you want to save time. So I've just laid down a few thin coats of white as a base on this weapon. Now we'll grab some of our Kato red. Lay a nice, smooth, even amount on. See, I'm using the side of the brush as much as I can to affect maximum surface area. Get the most damage done with every sweep. Or paint. Damage, paint. Sometimes the two can be the same. But yeah, we'll just lay it on there. It's somewhat diluted, so it lays down nice and flat. Larger brush, deeper reservoir, holds more paint, doesn't dry out on me quite as quickly as, say, trying to base coat this with a toothpick. So if you haven't used a larger brush, I would highly recommend it. The brush in question is a synthetic size 6. Golden Taklon bristle. And there. Just like that. You can see over the white foundation, the red comes out much quicker in a vibrant sense. Of course, it's not completely done without many, many thin layers. We'll just give that a minute to dry, and next what I'm going to do is start wet blending some of the red together with the orange. And ordinarily with like a power weapon, you kind of have two halves of the blade. And I'm shading and I'm creating a light situation on one side and kind of mirroring the opposite on the other side. In the case of this magical weapon, you can see it has all of these textures, these swirls sculpted into it. So I kind of want to use those as my guide for the blending and for the directions. So I'm going to be trying to kind of work my brightest angles or my brightest coats of paint around those swirling angles. So we'll just lay down the red once again. And then, I don't have to be too delicate. I just want a nice thin coat, something to wet blend into when I start bringing the orange into play. I'll take that orange, start touching the center. And yeah, just following these swirls. You know, as it moves inward, gets a little bit tighter. I'm bringing more orange into play. Maybe I'll accent this this little curve down here. Using the side of the brush allows me to manipulate much more paint than with the smaller brush. You know, bringing a broad sweeping motion. You can see I'm always moving in the same direction, because as you make a stroke with your brush, paint will accumulate at the end of that brush stroke. So if you're pulling it back and forth, you're going to wind up with torn silly putty. But if you're combing it all in the same direction, you know, think of it in a sense like you're sculpting with the paint. You're creating micro texture with each brush stroke. So as I'm following the curves of all these swirls, I'm creating texture that moves in that same direction, down on that atomic level. I'll have to reignite the back, just laying down another pass of red. And to kind of point out how thin these coats are, you see I've had one brush load of paint, and I spread that all the way across the entire surface. Now we're just copying the front, accenting those swirls. Just like so. And wherever I have an area that the blend might look a little ragged, I'll slide the brush downwards a little bit, because there's a certain portion of this brush that has paint on it, and the portion that doesn't have any paint on it. The portion without the paint, that can kind of pick up where I don't want any deposit to be happening. It can also be blending the two colors together in the sense where you have a blending nub to create a smoother gradient. So using the portion of the paintbrush that doesn't have any paint on it to your advantage is the lesson there. And of course I want this to be a little bit dramatic. I want it to look bright and shimmering, you know, glowing in a sense. But I'm going to pull just a little bit of black into it. I'll just mix the black with some red off to the side and just glaze it into these portions where I've left mainly just red showing. This will help the orange areas look a lot brighter. Yes, I'm licking the brush, I'm eating that paint, but it's to turn that brush into a blending nub. You could quickly wipe it on your paper towel, but old habits die hard. So you can see we're kind of getting a mock-up of the light situation here. I'll go back in with the orange and just start layering up using those sideways sweeps. And it's gonna take a little bit of doing. You're gonna have to just have some patience for this. These layers will come very subtly, very gradually. Just take a little time to dedicate to the process. It'll be worth it in the end. There's no need to rush, because everything I do, I rush through so I can rush through something else. Something like that from a Stephen King book. So when you're working on achieving a very smooth gradient, just put on your patience hat and your tidiness boots and whatever else you've got to wear to catch the muse. Just take a little time. See, now I'm starting to get somewhere. And you know, now that I've set up the direction, chosen where I want the brightest orange bits to be, where the deepest portions lie, and all the midtones in between, I just need to keep laying the paint down, reaffirming those boundaries. I'll take some orange and pick up some of these edges. Occasionally, you must rotate the model to better suit your brush stroke instead of trying to rotate the brush around the figure. This is why painting handles like the hobby holder can come in very handy. Alright, just working the midtones. Kato red. It's a nice true pure red. And tending to the black tones. Well, dark, not black, but there is a touch mixed into that red. I'll just do a little dancing on that blade, a little sword dance. Smooth out those areas. Not too shabby, which is what we're going for. Now, to further brighten things up a little bit, I can start bringing some... Highlighting red is tricky, right? I want to make it brighter. Do I add orange? Do I add white? If I start adding white, it becomes pink. If I start adding orange, well, it becomes orange. Mixing the two together will create kind of a salmon tone, and that's usually the direction I go in. In this case, I want it to be very vibrant, very bright, so I'll just be adding portions of white into the orange. You can always filter it back down with an ink wash. Making sure to lay down very, very thin layers. All right, let me show you just how thin this paint is. You see the consistency, it's like dirty paint water. Just a thin glaze. But notice the tip of my brush is not losing its shape when it has paint on it. The brush is not oversaturated with water, widening all of the bristles. What I have here, I call a controllable amount, because you could have the right level of dilution, but too much of that amount on your brush. You need an amount that you can control. See how it just stays in the places that I put it? Because again, working with very, very thin amounts, slowly moving up that gradient. That will get your smoothest amounts, and it'll be really cool in comparison to all the texture on this model. Contrast comes in many forms: light, dark, complementary colors, the contrast of textures giving way to smooth surfaces. There are many, many ways to create an interesting situation. Just like that. Now we're getting somewhere. But again, increasing that level of saturation. I'm working a little fast, just like in the Power Sword video, and I ripped it. So, trying not to this time around. Like I said previously, shingles on a rooftop. You're covering less and less of that area, moving upwards in your progression. Just try to think about painting as not painting, right? It's sculpting, it's roofing, it's sweeping a mop across a floor. It's never actually just painting. This is the way I think. Everything is a metaphor with a narrative. I can't help it. I'm stuck this way. It's probably from wargaming. But I think the lesson remains true. Always moving in that same direction, creating that accumulation. This is how magical swords are made. Ignore all outside distractions, all the motorcycles and trucks belting out exhaust into the air I'm trying to breathe just outside the window. That doesn't exist in our little world here. All that exists is the vengeful spirit of the forest and his magical blade, cutting down all the poachers. You gotta talk yourself into some serenity once in a while. All right, I'm gonna let this sit and dry for a moment, let it really sink in, desaturate a bit. We'll come back and we'll do some edge highlighting and talk about it as well. All right, so now everything has had a chance to sit, dry, really firm itself up. We're gonna go back in. First, I want to talk about some edge highlighting. And for that, we'll use our brightest or closest to the brightest tone. So in this case, we've got orange and we have white. I'll use pure white in some areas and a mixture of the orange and white in some other areas. And let me explain something about edge highlighting. Get out our swatch. So, observe. My brush is hanging, and hopefully you've got a perfect 90-degree angle to go at. Not always ideal, but hopefully you can reach the model like this. See, I'm not actually drawing on the edge. I'm using the side of the brush and that angle to catch the paint. Just like so. Another thing I want to add to that, you don't want a big ball of paint on the end of your brush. Imagine pressing that ball into your angle. It's going to come over it thus far. By just having the brush coated, you can ride that edge as thinly as possible. Maybe you want the wide edge highlight and then a thinner one on top of that. Go ahead. I'm happy with it. That's fine. But just be aware. And I'm also going to be using the top-down light situation to guide me, my edge highlights. Go just like so. Overhanging that brush. I'll have to go back and reload once in a while. The paint is semi-diluted, but again, it's a little thicker because I want it to hold its place. The bristles are moist, allowing for a little bit of transfer, a little bit of flow. And yeah, so right here might be a bit of a trickier angle. Let me get my head out of the shot, and we'll just sweep it forward like so. See, I'm pressing so lightly, I'm missing half the time. I have to kind of calibrate my line. I also get very quiet and grumbly as I'm painting between breaths. Take a deep breath, make a smooth line, try not to get dizzy, keep repeating. So that's how the edge highlighting works, but there's also another little accent that I want to add to this. Given the Sylvaneth nature, the tree spirit nature of these designs, I'm going to just make it look a little more magical. Some very thin lines that kind of match the color that I blended up to. some thin kind of curving lines. Very, very subtle accent. But just using it to call out the curving shapes and forms. Just bring that into play a little bit more as you lead towards the highlights. I could lay some of those down, blend back over them. I can go back in with a little bit of red and a lot of orange. Kind of throw it over some of the areas further back. Less is more here. Your blade can quickly just become a mess of swirls, but just a little accent, right? You pull the viewer's eye in from a distance. They see this like glowing red weapon. They're like, oh, cool. They look a little closer. They see these little lines and textures, and they get a sense that's a little bit more magical. Or they think it's just a piece of painted plastic. Whatever they think. You're rewarding the viewer for just taking a little bit of a longer look. Everyone's individual experience is just that. It's unique to the viewer. But yeah, we'll just keep edge highlighting, accenting, all that jazz. Just like so. And I'll put some white in, that brightest area. And another thing that is kind of second nature to me, but I want to point it out. When you see me, I'm not even going to have any paint on my brush for this. You see me making these fine edges, and it looks like I'm just holding the brush in one hand, the model in the other hand. But actually, you can see my pinky is coming down, and I'll use it to stabilize my brush. Just like so. See, I'm kind of planting it. Got a bit of a fulcrum to work with. It's just a little trick that helps me get steadier hands, and a lot of the time my elbows are planted as well. A fivefecta, if you will, of balancing points. So, thank you all for hanging out. I hope this serves to inspire, motivate painters out there, try something new. Thanks to Uncle Adam, the whole crew at Tabletop Minions for everything they do. It's been an absolute joy being able to reach so many people through this channel. So a big thanks to you. Catch up with me on the social medias. I'm on Instagram. It's kind of fun. I'm also on Facebook, posting finished models, information about classes I'll be teaching, taking in that information. And also I stream on Twitch. It's always random. And my top guarantee is that it'll always be weird. So tune in, check it out, and I'll see you next time.